we are back with another edition of My Marijuana Chronicles, sponsored as always by our good friends at O2 Vape. Make sure you vape safe and check them out at o2vape.com and use promo code MyMMAnews at checkout for 20% off your order. On this edition from Golden, Colorado, we have Paul Winkler. He's an analytical chemist who does the testing process for pesticides in the cannabis plant. He does webinars to tell other people about what they should be testing for in the plants. We talk about the farm to shelf life of the plant. We have some fun chats about old school boxing, current MMA, just a fun educational chat all around. Keep it locked. All right, fight fans, I'm being joined by my man Paul Winkler, and I don't think anybody's going to be able to tell what he does better than he does. Give a little backstory. A mutual friend of ours, Paige, hits me up, and she says, would you like to have a scientist that, that works with cannabis on your show? Make it happen, Paige. I want that guy on my show, please. And I'm being joined by him now. Paul Winkler, thank you for joining me, brother.
Hey, Adam, how's it going? And thanks for having me on. It's kind of funny. I work for a company called SciEx, and Paige just started there not too long ago. And I got SciEx into the business of developing cannabis testing methods. And really that came out because I'm from Colorado, and I could see what the state was and wasn't doing, and I know they needed some help. And so I started doing some cannabis LC webcasts, I guess, or webinars talking about how to analyze things like pesticides in cannabis. So I've been kind of known as the cannabis guy inside SciEx. And when Paige started, she goes, I keep hearing about this cannabis guy. And it was me. And she'd been with the company for a couple of months. I had never really connected with her. And then we started talking. She goes, oh, my God, I got to put you in touch with some of these guys. So I didn't know. I was surprised. So
that's funny.
Yeah, that's how I got to know Paige, and kind of a small world. So, yeah.
So I got to ask, first and foremost, what got you into cannabis from the jump?
Well, really, my interest in cannabis is more as an analytical chemist, particularly not necessarily as a consumer, but I have some interesting stories about that. But cannabis is one of those things, as an analytical chemist, anybody can do a very simple analysis like in drinking water, but something like the cannabis plant, very complex. So it's an interesting scientific challenge. And so I was kind of drawn to that. And it's also one of those situations where, people are consuming this product and you're breathing it into your lungs, and it really needs to be cleaned. And yet, because it's such a difficult, dirty matrix, I was drawn to how do we make sure that this thing is safe for people? And pesticides are used in these products. They definitely are. They certainly were before a lot of regulations came in place. And you have to test this. And as an analytical chemist, I wanted to ensure that product safety was really possible to meet. And so that's how I got into it, because I saw what was happening in Colorado, saw how many people were using it, including a lot of friends of mine, and just assuming products are safe because they bought it at a store, which is not a good assumption. And so I got involved to make sure that testing is done correctly so people can have confidence in what they're using.
I got to ask, you mentioned that you did have your PhD. Now, did you think when you were going through school and everything that you would wind up in the field of working with cannabis and something that, one, is so booming right now, and two, has a very big stigma behind it?
Oh, no, absolutely not. When I was growing up, cannabis was a gateway drug. It was taboo. While I knew guys in high school and college that certainly used some cannabis, I didn't see a whole lot of it. But in graduate school, it was a drug. Only criminals used it, and it just wasn't mainstream. And again, growing up in the kind of household I did, my mother was very strict about those kind of things. And this was a gateway drug, and it was terrible. And if you smoked this, you'd go crazy. And so now to find myself, 40 years later, actually being the cannabis guy at our company, no, I would have never thought that.
Is that a title that you proudly hold? Like, does that mean something to you? Are you happy to have that?
Yeah, I'm happy to have that, actually. I don't think my company would have probably ever got into the world of cannabis testing, or they would have been very late to it if I hadn't said, hey, we need to get into this. There's opportunity. The technology that my company makes is well suited to this. I think it's probably the best way to do this testing. And we wouldn't have got into it. And so I knew a lot about it. And yeah, I like that. They call me Captain Cannabis at SciEx.
Captain Cannabis. I love it.
And so, I'm proud of that. I'm proud of what we built. And we We have done some really good things. And when I see people, at laboratories that have our product doing great testing, I feel good about that because I know that it's helping the industry in general.
Now, I got to ask, what do you enjoy most about your job? You kind of answered that, but I mean, going to work, not, every single day, what's the biggest peak of your day? What brings you the most joy, the biggest smile to your face?
Easily interacting with people. And, I'm now a marketing development manager, even though I was a chemist for 40 years. What I really like is when I get a chance to talk to people about, say, the analysis of cannabis or pesticides, cannabinoids in cannabis plants. I like interacting with people, like talking about what they're doing and helping them do it better. And I like talking about the technology. It's the interaction with people. And that's why I got into the marketing job, because really you get to deal with people a lot. And I like showing people how things can be done right. And that's really what I like best in my day.
In your personal opinion, what do you think the biggest misconception is about cannabis, given the stigma behind it, everything?
Easily, in my mind, the biggest misconception is that if you use cannabis, you're unreliable and you're a druggie. It's just simply not true. But a lot of people, they had that. When I was growing up, I was in high school in the 70s, and definitely the perception then was if you smoked pot, you were just a bum. You were never going to go to school. You were never going to be successful. You were going to end up homeless. And that stigma is still there to some regard. In fact, when people talk about hemp and cannabis, which is technically incorrect, hemp and marijuana are cannabis. But I've talked to people that are involved in the hemp industry, and they say, well, we don't like to use the word marijuana because of the stigma. Personally, I think that stigma needs to go away. And I think young guys like yourself, your generation, is going to probably go a long way towards getting rid of that. But yeah, that stigma, that's the biggest problem.
And the guys in my era and my age think that the guys that were being called, the hippies or, the stoners or whatever back in the day, I think they were on to something a little bit earlier than what everybody gives them credit for.
Yeah, I think they completely were. And just a little aside on this, when I go to a lot of these cannabis conferences, I talk to people that have been growing cannabis for 40, 50 years. And what's amazing to me is what kind of scientists these guys are. In many cases, they don't have training in plant genetics. They don't have training in agronomy. They don't have training in supply side logistics. But guess what? They are experts in those things. So I'm always amazed when I go to cannabis conferences and talk to these people. It's like, holy crap, they know what they're doing and they're really smart. So I shake my head thinking again, 40 years ago, these are the drug addicts that you were talking about? No, these people, they got it going on. They know what's going on.
Yeah. So obviously I fuse this together because I know firsthand, I know a ton of athletes in the combat sports realm that they utilize cannabis. And I like to use this as my platform, given that I'm a medical patient in Delaware. I feel like I have a voice that I can fuse the both of them, being in the journalistic field of mixed martial arts and knowing that combat sports athletes do consume and use. So I got to ask, are you a fight fan? Tell me a little bit of something. What's some of your favorite fights from your day?
So again, sadly, to age myself, I remember Frazier Ali was a big fight. And I grew up, my grandfather used to box Golden Gloves. And so I did a little bit of boxing when I was younger. And, really what I used to like is watching Monday Night Boxing. We used to go over to my grandfather's house and just watch boxing. But the big fight, I mean, back in my day with Frazier, Ali, those were some of the big fights for me. And, back in those days, I think they were some of my favorite athletes.
Have you gotten a chance to catch any of the MMA fights or any of the new generation?
I do. I watch some MMA, not all the time. I really like it, but, I'm busy and I'm not home much anymore. But I like it. What I really like about it is just the overall athleticism, to be honest with you. So again, I boxed a little bit. I enjoyed boxing, and those are tremendous athletes. But really, you're just using your hands. And so when you throw in the whole element of legs and leverage and bodies, I think it's a beautiful art form ultimately, and I think it's been done well too. That is, you want to compete. It's a sport. It's not about killing a guy. It's about competing, and it's about training, and it's about doing the very best you can, which is, I think what epitomizes the great thing about all sports, really. I mean, I coached hockey and baseball for years, and I always taught the kids, practice hard, understand the game, play well. If you win, you win. If you lose, you lose. But if you prepared and you did the best you can, it was a good day.
From your scientific standpoint, and I couldn't agree with you more with what you just said, but your scientific standpoint, because I feel that a lot of these points need to be pointed out by people that are in your perspective and in your vantage point. What do you think some of the benefits for the cannabis benefits for athletes are? Some of the biggest benefits they can receive from it.
Well, let's just start with, it's not really a pharmaceutical, and it's more of a natural product. So a lot of the side effects that you might have just aren't there. I mean, an example would be THC, for example, can help you sleep, and you don't have the side effects, and you don't have it's not addictive, so you're not going to get addicted to a cannabinoid. That's a huge plus. And I think in terms of cannabinoids, there's a whole lot we don't really know, because there's a lot of different cannabinoids. There's, I would say, essentially 3 main cannabinoids that people are aware of. Really, people talk about 5. There's THC, THCA, which is just an acid form, so it's kind of the same thing. There's CBD and CBDA. And then there's cannabinol, CBN. And, we're just beginning to understand what these things can be really used for. And I think it's also important to note that I think probably they need to be used together synergistically. The plant evolved. We evolved as an organism to consume that. So sometimes if you just go out and get THC purely, it's maybe not as good as, say, smoking a plant or eating a plant extract. But I do know for a fact things like THC will help you sleep. My wife uses that now instead of OTC sleep aids, because she sleeps a lot better. I know that CBD certainly helps people relax. My oldest son is a cannabis consumer, and the CBD, after a long day, he works for unions in the world of labor. There's a lot of conflict and a lot of stress in a job like that. And at night when he's just hanging out by himself and his wife, that really helps them relax. I think there are a lot of benefits in that way. I mean, in many times, why do any of us, have a beer or why do I have a bourbon at night? It's been a long day. I want to sit down. I want to relax. And studies are very clear that relaxing at the end of the day is a critical thing. Yeah. And an MMA fighter, these guys are intense athletes. They put their bodies
some
through
of the most intense
stress.
athletes in the world.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I never trained harder than when I boxed a little bit. That was hard work. I mean, I played football, and baseball nowhere near as hard as that. Maybe a little more fun than getting your head punched in, but they were, you were in great shape. And so I think these things, they can help with pain management, they can help with sleep management, and they can help with relaxation. There's nothing wrong with using this recreationally just to take the edge off and relax. People should not be afraid of that aspect of cannabis. And so it has a lot of uses. What it doesn't have is problems with addiction. It doesn't have problems with some severe side effects where, there's a lot of pharmaceuticals. If you take too much, you can die. Not can die, you will die, and people have died. So it's a much safer alternative. And again, I think when you look at how we evolved, people always talk about don't eat processed food, eat more natural, more wholesome things, because that's how we evolved. Well, cannabis kind of fits into that. It's kind of like a non-processed therapeutic, if you will.
What are your thoughts on having it on essentially the banned list? You can't test positive for it. You just can't. What's your thoughts on that?
I think that's wrong. I think that cannabinoids should not be banned at all. I mean, to my perspective, they may help you relax. They may help with some of your pain management, but they're not performance enhancing.
Yeah.
It's not like
I think I find it ironic that some have labeled it before in, the higher above and everything in the sanctioning bodies as a performing enhancing drug. You being a professional that you are, what's your professional opinion on that? And I think you were just leading to that.
Yeah, well, it's not at all a performance-enhancing drug. It's not going to increase your muscularity. It's not going to increase your speed or your quickness. It's like taking ibuprofen because your joints are sore because you broken your fingers a few times, and that hurts after a while. So it doesn't make you a better fighter. Towards the tail end of my sports career, people were starting to take anabolic steroids, and you could see a guy that you used to go against that just picked up 40 pounds over the summer. And, that definitely made them better. You can see what it's done for certain athletes in other sports where they're quicker, they're stronger. It changes your physical performance. And cannabinoids don't do that. So if you're a good fighter, you're a good fighter because you train hard and it's your genetics. Cannabinoids are not going to make you better than what you can be. So I don't think they should be banned at all.
No, and I agree with you, but I mean, hopefully this puts us in the right direction. This is what I'm pushing for, but we can only do our part so much. But my next question is, do you see any potential harm in it? I mean, other than the potential, I might eat too much, I might sleep a little too much or anything like that. But as far as like a scientific backing, do you see anything harmful?
Not really. To be clear, you can take too much and
Of
run
anything.
into you can have a cannabinoid-induced psychosis. Earlier this year, there was a story. I live in Denver, Golden specifically, and there was a story in the Denver paper about they're seeing higher numbers of people coming in with some adverse effects to taking a cannabinoid. Those are mostly related to people taking edibles like a gummy, and they'll take a gummy and they don't feel anything 10 minutes later, when you really need to give it more like a half hour to 45 minutes. So then they pop another one and another one and another one. Now they have a massive amount of cannabinoids in their system, and they don't know how to handle it. And so they kind of freak out. They have an adverse effect, and they go off to the hospital. What they don't do is die. So like anything, moderation is important, I believe. I don't think you should come home and, smoke an ounce a day. I don't think that'd be good for you. But in terms of things like liver damage, kidney damage, some of the other things that you might get from, say, too much alcohol, no, they're really not there. If you're smoking, of course, anytime you smoke, it's not the best thing for your lungs. But, if you take an edible, it's probably okay. Having said that, however, you don't get the full entourage effect from an edible because they don't have all the things in there. But I think of all the things that people may take for various reasons, for pain, even for recreation, it's probably the safest alternative I know of. I mean, people just don't. You've seen guys get drunk and pass out, or get drunk, pass out, vomit, and die. I don't know anybody that died from cannabinoid overload.
Now, being in your field with the fighters, a lot of the fighters, and I'll just say me in specific, not being a fighter, but in the fight field, having my medical card, right? I can go to my certified dispensaries, and I get the product that I want and everything like that. Is there anything that fighters or athletes or anybody in general that consumes cannabis, anything they should look out for as far as contaminants? Because who better to ask?
Yeah, so contamination of cannabis products is important. I know in talking to several of the laboratories that have our equipment, we do see from time to time a plant that has a high concentration of something like, I say, myclobutanil or imidacloprid. Those are a couple of chemicals that are used to preserve the plants. I think that can be problematic, especially if you consume a lot. If you don't consume a whole lot of cannabinoids, it's probably a little bit less of an issue. But anytime you're breathing something, small amounts of pesticides can cause problems. So when you buy a product, they will come with a certificate of analysis, a COA. When you buy it from a legal retailer, I would ask for that COA. And you can go online, because they'll tell you who the lab was. You can go online and look at the lab, at least have an idea. Does this look like a reasonable facility, or does this look like a lab that just kind of popped up overnight? There are big differences, and not every cannabis testing facility is getting reliable results. So I think you need to take a look at it. Ask for the COA or the link to it.
Is there any Is there anybody that you can get in contact with if, for example, I'll just
Mhm.
come up with a hypothetical situation of I go to my dispensary, I look at the COA, and I, hit my buddy Paul up. Hey, Paul, what do you think of this? And then you tell me what you think might potentially be wrong. Is there anybody I can get in contact with, or, fighters, obviously, because I'm looking out for their safety?
Yeah, so typically, if there's concern that the quality of analysis isn't good, you go to the regulating authority. In Colorado, it's the Colorado Department of Health and Environment, and in conjunction with the Marijuana Enforcement Division, MED. In California, it's the Bureau of Cannabis Control. Every state, certainly every state with adult recreational use marijuana, has a regulation body, and you can go onto the website and you can tell that regulator that you have a concern that this isn't being done right or that's not being done right. For example, there was a guy in California a few years back. He was consuming some flour, and he started getting really numb in his extremities. And he called the BCC and said, "Hey, I'm concerned about this." The BCC went out and took another look, took some samples, and sure enough, they found a chlorinated pesticide that shouldn't have been there.
No way.
Yeah, so it can happen, and you can have
Yeah.
effects.
Yeah.
But yeah, state regulators, they will help you out in this. So if you're using CBD type products, those are hemp, and we don't really have good testing guidelines for that yet. So there, it's a little bit harder. You can't go to say in Delaware and say, "Hey, I think this hemp's contaminated." They don't really have a list exactly to test against it. That's coming, and I think we'll have regulations developed. And this whole cannabis thing came on us so fast.
Yeah.
That from a regulation point of view, we're still trying to catch up.
Sorry, 1 second. I had a call come in. I had to decline, but I'll edit that out. But anyway, so another thing I wanted to ask: is there a process in quality control? Like it's from the dispensary to before it goes onto the shelf. Is there somebody that is able to test it for the quality?
So there is, and that's really what the testing laboratories are for. So typically, a grower will send their product off to a lab to get it tested, and they're going to test for potency, the cannabinoid profile, because you must know how much THC is in there. That's required by regulation, or CBD, either way. And they'll want to know, do we see pesticides or do we not? And they're going to want to know somewhat about the terpenes. So then maybe that goes to the store and you buy that. But in many cases, they'll take that and they'll take it to a manufacturer where they're going to extract it, and they're going to make edibles like brownies and chocolates and gummies. Well, once you do the extract, once you make that extract, you have this kind of a thick liquid, and you will test that because maybe you have a trace amount of pesticide on your flour. When you concentrate that down, now you have a much higher concentration. So they test the extract, and then after they make the product, like say a gummy, it gets tested again. And in each one of those stages, you have to test for the amount of cannabinoids, and they will look, depending on the state, for certain pesticides to make sure that the products are safe. So they have a lot of checks.
Yeah, thank God, right? Because somebody that's using this for medicine, they should be tested as strongly as possible. What do you think the next 10 years holds for cannabis, as far as where do you think it's going to go from regulations aspect? I mean, right now in my state, Delaware, for example, it's only medical. Some states, like obviously Colorado, recreational, medical, California, recreational, medical. What do you think the future is going to hold, let's say, in the next 10 years?
I think absolutely 10 years from now, we will have all 50 states will have adult use regulations in place. So you will be able to consume recreationally everywhere in the United States. It's probably not the next 4 or 5, but every time we have an election, so every 2 years, we seem to pick up a state or two. And now with hemp being legal across the entire United States, I think we're going to start seeing people understanding that the world isn't coming to an end. Colorado hasn't fallen into a drug-induced chaos because we have adult use recreational marijuana. Neither has California. The country of Canada is still doing fine. And so I think once we get, maybe 20, 25 states with legalized adult rec for marijuana, I think we'll just do it nationally. I'm certain that'll happen.
Well, Paul, man, I appreciate you taking the time, especially in the rough times of COVID-19 and everybody being stuck down in quarantine.
Yeah.
I do got to ask, I'm sure that a lot of the fighters will appreciate this, that do consume and use this as their medicine. So what positive advice, give them something that they can look forward to, give them something positive for my fighters out there.
Well, first off, let me say that I think you're living in a great time, even where you can use something like CBD. You guys, you have a lot of joint pain, you have a lot of body stresses, and these cannabinoids I have seen just anecdotally really be very, very useful drug for you guys. And I think you're living in a great era that fighters 20 years ago didn't have the chance to use these products to help relax and rejuvenate yourself. So you're living in a great time. That's my good news here. You can use these. They're safe, and they will really help you out.
All right. There goes my man, Paul Winkler. Paul, man, I appreciate taking the time. Honestly, it was a great conversation. It was great getting to know you a little bit on camera, off camera. I appreciate you taking the time, man. Honestly, it was a pleasure.
You too, Adam. And one thing, you may get some other questions about testing and analysis. Dude, call me back up anytime.
I will do. I'll take advantage of that. My man, Paul Winkler, joining me on My Marijuana Chronicles. Another episode in the books, my friends. And we do thank you for joining. For Paul Winkler, I am Adam Christ. And make sure you keep it locked to MyMMAnews.com for all your fight news needs.